Yo, what is up, everybody? It's your boy, your bro, your Brody Broski, your homie Dyson. And today we got Sabertooth going up against the Green Goblin. So without further ado, let's get it. Punch that subscribe button, and let's go. Ever wonder what a warped and twisted version of peak human potential would look like? Well, that's the Green Goblin. The Green Goblin is Norman Osborn, a scientist who worked for the military, creating prototype weapons and even a super soldier serum. This serum had its flaws and its side effects. The thing was, it wasn't approved for human trials when Osborn decided to sacrifice it all and risk it all and actually be his own guinea pig for his own serum. The serum caused the test lab rats to go insane. And we saw what it did to Osborn. It created an alter ego, an alternate persona, known as the Green Goblin. This entity within Osborn's mind and body. An entity that is malicious and sinister in every sense of the word. What comes with his vendetta with Spider-Man is the fact that he can take a beating and deliver a severe beating. He has superhuman abilities, as when he was exposed to the serum, he was granted superhuman reflexes similar to those of Spider-Man, where he can actually move so quickly that he can perceive threats almost in slow motion, and he can actually react quicker than any human on the planet. He's very, very physically powerful as well. In fact, he can lift around 9 tons, if not more. He can react to Spider-Man's attacks, and he can actually beat down 2 different versions of Spider-Man, Tom Holland's Spider-Man and Tobey Maguire's. His exosuit is very durable, but the blades on his glider are sharp enough to penetrate through it. He has a plethora of pumpkin bombs, wrist blades on one gauntlet and a nerve agent that shoots from the other. He's got a trident-like weapon that comes out of his glider. The glider itself has blades that shoot out from the front, extracting to be able to impale whatever it flies into. Not to mention the fact that the glider also is equipped with machine guns and missiles. Some pumpkin bombs can even reduce a human to nothing but a skeleton. The Goblin is known for being able to hand out vicious ass beatings. The Green Goblin was one of the greatest threats for both Tom Holland and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. His skill, speed, and strength are matched only by his battle intellect and ferocity. On the other hand, we got Victor Creed, a mutant who was born as an abnormality, a bestial being that progressively devolved, becoming more and more animalistic. The thing is, though, that he maintained his clever human intellect and edge over the competition. In fact, he's more intelligent and strategic than your average human, but he is animalistic and in some ways like a feral animal. Sabertooth is diabolical. He's an almost lichen-like beast that can lift over 10 tons. Even Wolverine admits he's physically stronger and has a better healing factor. Sabertooth is in predator mode on the prowl. He senses a scent that he's never smelled before. He smells something human, but not quite. He smells something enhanced, something like a super soldier. He knows what he's after. And so he knows what he's about to be getting himself into. The Goblin soars into frame on his glider as he unleashes machine gun fire from his turrets on his glider directly at Sabertooth. Sabertooth moves so quickly the human eye can't even track him as he dodges these bullets, running and jumping off of walls before he runs and leaps through the air directly at the glider, narrowly dodging a missile shot straight from the glider directly at him. As it lands on the ground and explodes, Sabertooth lands directly on the glider with his claws digging into each side of the glider. He then grabs the Green Goblin by his leg with his right arm and yanks him off his own glider. The Goblin plummets to the ground. Gravity pulls him with immense force as he goes flying, creating a shockwave with the impact from him free falling from such a height straight into the ground. Cracks form in the concrete. Sabertooth leaps off of the glider after the goblin and lands directly in front of him. As he goes to grip him up by the throat, the goblin extracts his wrist blades and goes to stab him straight through the stomach with them. Sabertooth simply maneuvers out of the way, dodging the blades, as he then backhands the green goblin so hard he goes flying at least 150 feet back. His body flies sideways before he lands on the ground, rolling across it before slamming and embedding into a wall of a building. Sabertooth runs over on all fours like a quadruped directly at the green goblin. As the green goblin gets up and runs at Sabertooth, he goes to kick Sabertooth directly in the face, but Sabertooth leaps over top of him, landing behind him, as he then pounces on his back and begins slashing his back viciously. The goblin grips his head up, reaching behind him as he grabs his skull and lifts the massive Sabertooth up, slamming him over his head directly into the ground, causing rubble to fly everywhere. As then he stomps Sabertooth directly in the face. He goes to stomp him again. Sabertooth sits up and gets into a quadrupedal position, running away before turning back around and leaping through the air directly at the goblin. The goblin simply leaps through the air and kicks him with both legs, causing him to fly back through the air and slide across the ground on his feet, with the ground breaking beneath his feet, with his toe claws slicing through the concrete. The goblin summons his glider behind Sabertooth as it dumps ammunition directly into him, shooting him many times, putting multiple holes all through his chest and stomach, before Sabertooth just turns around, leaps through the air, and slashes his claws straight through the bottom of the glider, completely disabling it, causing it to crash land to the ground. The goblin then begins running at Sabertooth as he turns around and runs as a biped on two legs directly at the green goblin. He runs at him and then swings his claws. The goblin ducks and dodges out of the way before turning around and slashing him across the back with his wrist blades. Then Sabertooth turns around and punches the goblin in the face so hard he goes flying back before landing on his feet and running back at Sabertooth once more. He goes to stab him straight through the skull. Sabertooth grabs the blade directly by the blade with his bare hand, blood pouring from his hand as he breaks one of the wrist blades off and throws it into the goblin's chest. The goblin leaps over to his glider, opening it and retrieving his trident-like weapon. Sabertooth leaps through the air, savagely coming down at the green goblin, ready to slash his throat open. The goblin blocks this attack with his right arm, as he then takes his trident-like weapon, extracting the blades as he impales Sabertooth with it. Sabertooth swings, the green goblin dodges it, then he swings again, slashing the goblin straight across his helmet, slicing through it as he then grips him up by his shoulders, headbutting him so hard he shatters his helmet off of his face. The goblin manages to kick him multiple feet back as he flies through the air, landing on his feet, ripping the trident out and breaking it over his knee. They run at each other once more before the green goblin leaps through the air and comes down with a massive punch directly at Sabertooth's skull. Sabertooth catches his fist and begins crushing his hand in his palm. The goblin's feet meet the ground once more as he ferociously knees Sabertooth in the chest twice, with the second knee being so powerful it sends him flying through the brick wall behind him. He digs his clawed feet into the ground as he reaches down, slicing his hand claws through the ground as he slides across the surface, slowing himself to a halt. Sabertooth snarls, shaking the pain off. Goblin leaps through the wall, landing directly in front of Sabertooth as Sabertooth grips up a truck with his right hand, lifting it up with one arm as he then slides it with much force and momentum, wailing it directly across the ground at the green goblin. It goes flying towards him as the goblin front flips directly over it as it crashes into a concrete pillar behind both of them and explodes. The goblin leaps over top of Sabertooth, coming crashing down as he lands directly on the ground behind him, turning around and kicking his knee out, slashing him with his wrist blade across his back and spine. Sabertooth practically immediately regenerates. Sabertooth leaps, pouncing through the air as he then grips onto a wall, pushing his weight off of it and landing on another wall as he then turns around facing the goblin once more. He leaps through the air and impales both his claws directly under the pectoral muscles of the goblin, straight through his rib cage. The goblin makes eye contact with the hollow white eyes of Sabertooth as he simply says, "Well played." The goblin attempts to stab Sabertooth directly under his armpit, and when he goes to do it, Sabertooth yanks his clawed hand directly out of his chest and grips his wrist up before he can stab him, and he shatters the bones in his wrist, squeezing so hard. And then the goblin then knees Sabertooth before going to headbutt him as Sabertooth dodges his head out of the way and leans in, sinking his canine fangs directly into the goblin's throat. He bites so hard he tears through his esophagus and rips it completely out. The goblin falls to his knees as Sabertooth joins his hands together, lifting them up over his head and slamming them over the goblin's head. Before the goblin can even hit the ground, Sabertooth grips him up by what's left of his throat, cocking his bladed hand back as he then impales his two middle clawed fingers straight through the goblin's eye sockets, effectively finishing him off. Winner, Sabertooth. I know I've been gone off YouTube for a little while, and I don't expect anyone to understand, but for those who do understand that I've been going through shit, I thank y'all for your support and for bearing with me. Anyway, it's been your boy Dyson, and I'm outie.